Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to today's webinar partnered with Gordian, titled Predicting Construction Costs in Volatile Markets, Lessons from Recent Disasters. I'm Tamal Harbison with SAME's national team, and I would just like to go over a couple housekeeping rules before we get started today. You all are in a listen-only mode. We ask that you double check to see if your mics and phones are muted. Any questions, we ask that you write them in the questions tab during any time during the presentation. Also, you may download the PDF version of this presentation as well as the PDH certificate in the handout section in your control tab. This webinar will also be recorded. And now I would like to turn it over to Lisa. Lisa, I believe you're muted. 1 second.
Oh, no, it was my phone. I apologize. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on predicting construction costs in volatile markets. I'm Lisa Cooley, the Vice President of Federal Solutions at Gordian. Many of you know us better by the RSMeans data brand name. I was asked to share a few fun facts about myself per SAME policy, and was just reminded this week that I began my career as an art historian and somehow ended up in the construction business, and having the pleasure and joy in our pandemic schooling environment of getting back to my history roots and teaching my son and some of his friends about world history in our little homeschool learning pod. I am joined today by my esteemed colleague, Bob Mewis, and I will let him introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. Thank you, Lisa. My name is Bob Mewis. I'm principal engineer at Gordian. I've been with Gordian for 27 years now. One of my fun facts is that I enjoy home improvement projects. I really have a lot of fun working around the house. And my wife and I are avid tandem cyclists. We really enjoy our time together, and she doesn't get mad at me too often, but often enough. Back to you, Lisa.
All right. So we'll start with a quick poll just to kind of gauge our audience. Would like to know if you are active military or civilian working at a government agency or with a business or academic institution. So if you will answer the poll so that we can speak most effectively to our audience, that would be great. All right, we have lots of small businesses, which is super, but also a healthy share of folks from the DoD and federal sector. I'm sorry, I'm just waiting for the slide to advance, but I'll go ahead and give you a preview of our agenda. So today we are going to really talk about FEMA's response to the historic, kind of unprecedented 2017 hurricanes, and some of the challenges that FEMA had in estimating and enabling grants after these storms. We're going to talk about how Gordian did some cost research that assisted FEMA, and then we are going to talk about really applying FEMA's lessons learned to the DoD. I really see a lot of intersection in the challenges that FEMA has in estimating and predicting costs in these very volatile post-disaster environments. And I think that there are some implications and opportunities for learning for DoD. Many of the challenges that DoD estimators experience are similar. And so I will just launch right in. To provide a little context around these 2017 storms. The 2017 season really included 3 hurricanes. In addition to Irma and Maria, there was also Harvey. But Harvey was a CONUS location and did not have some of the infrastructure challenges and cost estimating challenges that Irma and Maria did. And so we're going to focus on Irma and Maria, which really devastated Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, caused widespread destruction of infrastructure. Homes, schools, hospitals, and businesses were lost. The islands were without power for weeks and weeks. And FEMA has the monumental task of funding, managing the recovery of these islands, which is very much still ongoing. It will probably be, like Katrina, a decade-long process. We really had kind of an unprecedented situation of 2 Category 5 hurricanes hitting within 2 weeks, a little bit of a 1-2 punch there. And ultimately, NOAA puts the price tag on the damage at $140 million. In normalized dollars, that is not quite as big as Katrina, which still stands as the largest disaster in U.S. history, largest hurricane disaster in U.S. history. But the 2 of them together come pretty close in scale. And there are some really specific challenges to the recovery in these island locations. So just a quick overview of some of FEMA's recovery challenges. And I should clarify that we are primarily talking about FEMA's public assistance program. There are many, several different branches of FEMA. Recovery is all about rebuilding and making communities whole, also making individuals whole. There is an individual assistance division, but the vast majority of grant funding flows through public assistance, and they have the most formulaic estimating approach, the most rigorous estimating approach, because they're managing the largest projects and the largest amount of funding. So we're really focused here on FEMA public assistance. FEMA's primary mission is in making these communities whole again, and sometimes even better than whole. The idea is to rebuild, but with some flexibility, and also to incorporate mitigation strategies to ensure that any future disasters will not cause the same level of damage. So trying to build in resilience and mitigation to address future disasters. So primary mission is making these communities whole, but FEMA is also very much a steward of the taxpayer dollars, and has to make sure that they are coming up with fair and reasonable costs as they distribute these monies to the local governments. FEMA is almost exclusively a granting agency, so these funds flow to local, state, tribal, and local governments, and in some cases nonprofits. And these local government entities are really empowered to procure and execute the construction in the way that is best for them. So it is very much a partnership. FEMA has tremendous responsibility, but also tries to really empower those local communities around the recovery efforts. Another real challenge, Congress has traditionally been quite generous in funding disaster recovery, but obviously, Congress does have oversight in much the same way that Congress has oversight of DoD's MILCON work, and sometimes there can be a lot of scrutiny around that. Because of the environment that FEMA works in, this very challenging post-disaster environment, they have really established a very standardized process for the formulation and management of grants for recovery, repair, and construction. The cost estimating format really emerged from the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000, and after much development and piloting was finally codified as a standard process in 2013. And the purpose of the cost estimating format is really to ensure consistent and fair application of costs through a very large core of estimators working in different areas. Some of them coming on as in a temporary capacity. So trying to make sure that across many disasters, many different skill set levels, that there's some consistency of results in the way that costs are formulated. So the CEF really relies on a industry standard, accurate and widely accepted data. RSMeans is by no means the only data set that can be used in the CEF. There are local, unit prices from DOT and things that can be used, but in practice, RSMeans is the most commonly used data, and so it really underpins the cost estimating format. That common data language is really important for FEMA and its many stakeholders because this project formulation and pricing is a somewhat collaborative and iterative process. It's not just a FEMA from on high saying this is what you're going to get. There really is a robust joint scoping and pricing process, and it's somewhat iterative. FEMA ultimately has the stewardship responsibility, but these stakeholders are very much collaborators and participants in formulating and arriving at the accurate amount of these grants. And then finally, FEMA in recent years, really kind of post-Katrina, has undergone a number of business process improvement initiatives. I think some of those were really informed by a McKinsey study in the early to mid 2000s. And one of these improvement initiatives is called Section 428. And it really changes the way that FEMA manages these grants. In the traditional process, FEMA works with the subgrantees, the local governments, to formulate the amount of the grant, and goes ahead and distributes that money, but then retains responsibility, almost an audit type responsibility, through the course of the project. And then there's a true up basically, and FEMA pays. It's always a cost sharing basis, but FEMA is basically on the hook for continuing to monitor and audit the project throughout the life of the project until closeout. That means that these disasters do sometimes go on for decades. Katrina still has a FEMA office operating, trying to close out projects. So the Section 428 process was really a way to optimize resources. FEMA has a lot of challenges like all of us do, in obtaining qualified estimators. That probably sounds familiar to some of you in DoD. It's really tough to find skilled and qualified estimators, and especially for FEMA because the geography, and they have to surge up in response to disasters, and the geography is often changing. So they require a very flexible workforce, and sometimes flexible resources and skilled resources do not necessarily go hand in hand. And so there was really a desire to reduce the people resource intensive nature of the process in ways that still fulfills the mission of FEMA. And so Section 428 really introduces almost like a block grant type of methodology, where instead of auditing throughout the course of the project and really in detail deciding what is and is not included, it really is just here's the amount of the loss, and then something of a block grant. There are still many rules, but it empowers local governments to use the money in ways that make sense. It provides them with more flexibility. That's all good, and it reduces FEMA's cost of doing business. It unfortunately also increases risk for both parties, because sometimes predicting what these things are going to cost several years in advance is a challenge, and especially in these volatile markets where you have a massive program of work being infused into sometimes small and undeveloped economies. And so that's kind of an overview of some of the challenges that FEMA was facing, and obviously dealing with these island economies and the logistics really increased the risk. So the local estimating challenges in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands were, first of all, a lack of data. Any of you that are familiar with RSMeans data may know that we do have a city cost index or localization factor for San Juan, Puerto Rico. We do not have one for the U.S. Virgin Islands. And as FEMA and its stakeholders, contractors, advisors started to really look at the program of work, they realized that one single city cost index was not going to reflect the cost in Puerto Rico. There were remote islands in Puerto Rico. There were remote inland areas, and that the cost would not be the same. So there was a sense that they needed more cost location factors in Puerto Rico. And then obviously they needed costs for the Virgin Islands, because the program of work there was very significant. There was also a recognition that there were certain logistical challenges to construction in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And this has to do with the infrastructure available, the transport of materials, and the terrain conditions on some of the islands. And then, you know, really that infrastructure, you know, whether it's electrical, it's roads. And then the skilled labor market was quite different than in the mainland US. And so trying to understand what that meant for construction costs. So FEMA had a lot of challenges. You know, how were they going to implement the cost estimating format in these remote locations? How were they going to predict the costs given some significant differences and also the massive program of work that was about to be infused into these smaller economies? So FEMA, and actually one of FEMA's contractors originally approached Gordian about how we might be able to help. Originally, we started working with a federally funded research and development corporation, RAND Corporation, but very quickly it became very much a partnership between RAND, FEMA, and Gordian to develop cost data assets to support the recovery work in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. I am going to hand it over to Bob Mewis to talk a little bit about what that effort looked like. And Bob Mewis oversaw the team that formulated this data. So Bob.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to make sure I have control of the slides now. So first off, I would like to explain what Gordian's involvement was in this effort. First, we needed to refine our localized costs for Puerto Rico. San Juan is still one of the locations that we track across the United States, and we felt that we needed to do a little bit more effort in San Juan location. And as Lisa already pointed out, the Virgin Islands did not have any kind of an index at all. Our customer indicated that there was going to be a need. We needed something on Puerto Rico in the urban areas, the cities, in the rural areas, the inland areas that are a little bit further away. And we also needed something for these islands that are off the coast of Puerto Rico. Also, our customer said St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix all needed some kind of an index. So I'll briefly give you an overview of what our index is and what it does. As you know, the RSMeans data that we deliver to customers is based upon a national average. The city cost index enables our customers to localize that national average to wherever they are. The way that we do that city cost index is we do some research on 65 construction materials that are very common to the commercial construction industry. We also do research on 23 labor rates and 6 pieces of construction equipment, including costs for fuel. Now, if you can imagine that we do that research all over the United States, we build a virtual construction project based upon the average cost for the entire United States using these 65 materials 23 trades, and 6 pieces of equipment. And then in order to get to the index for a particular location, we build that exact same construction project using the local cost this time. Let's use, for example, San Juan as the local place where we would build this virtual construction project. The comparison of the national average cost for this project to the cost of the project in San Juan becomes our city cost index. So when we were asked to take a look at what happened in Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands, we realized that the San Juan location just wasn't going to be enough. We decided that it would be best for us to take a hard look at the procedure, the methods that we use to build that city cost index. Changed the way we thought about it and decided to send a team of RSMeans engineers to the locations. And they had certain goals that they had to meet when they went there. First off, we set up some appointments with our customers, with local contractors, with architects and engineers in the area, and with building material suppliers. Then our engineers traveled to the locations. They were able to find, speak with, and obtain cost and logistical information from those local providers. Then we asked them to travel the islands to get a feel for what it's like being on the island. They had to understand what the on-island traffic is like, what the roads and conditions are for traveling, what's the accessibility of construction materials, labor, and construction equipment. Then they had to connect with some general contractors while they were there. We wanted to discuss with those general contractors what the material availability was. What's the labor availability and what is their skill set? We also wanted to discuss equipment. Do they own equipment? Do they have to rent equipment? Is it available and is it in good shape? And a very important part is productivity. We needed to find out if the on-island productivity was the same as mainland US or different. And frankly, was it different in different parts of the island? After all of that information was gathered, we had multiple conversations with a construction economist, and we made these observations. There were challenges on that island, those islands themselves. Never mind the challenges brought about by the hurricanes, but challenges of the construction industry on the island itself. First off, the traffic in the urban areas is really very, very bad. There's narrow roadways. There's a lot of elevation changes. Remember that there are offshore locations, even offshore from the islands themselves, where work needs to be done. The infrastructure there is poorly maintained, poorly built, and there's even some cultural differences that needed to be considered. An example of this was the team came back and told us, driving around, they would see equipment or vehicles, trucks, pulled over on the side of the road and just abandoned. They broke down and people just got out of them and walked away. So a little bit of a difference there. Some of the other things that we found out is there was some industrial development going on, that those were larger projects that attracted the workforce. So the number of available tradespeople was depleted, and then those that remained, it was questionable regarding their knowledge and skill level. There's unpredictable wage standards. So the Davis-Bacon wage rate for the island of Puerto Rico, let's say, had one wage for virtually every trade. Our research team found that that really wasn't the case. There's little or no benefits provided, and there's a lack of any kind of formal training program. And finally, material availability. There's very few on-island resources. Reliance upon ocean shipping and local logistical support infrastructure is the primary way of getting materials moved around the island. And the inventory is fine for local practices, but it's not necessarily the best for commercial construction. Now, all of these observations told us that we needed to review our methodology. We modified the standard process that we use to reflect the needs of our customer and the island recovery process. We built a way to account for materials and equipment to be loaded, unloaded multiple times during its handling. We built a method for figuring on travel time for the trucks and the operators of those trucks, the delivery trucks. We even had to figure in wait time and fees for ferries moving the trucks across open water. And then when required, we had to add in per diem costs for the truck drivers themselves if they had to stay over. Additionally, we obtained wages for the skilled trades by talking to general contractors, not something that we normally do. We discussed that with the designers and the general contractors, and it altered our standard methodology. We found that the wages weren't all the same for all the different trades, and we had to make adjustments for that. Now, one of the things that's important is productivity. We had to find a way to figure on what the differences in productivity were, not only from mainland US, but within the islands themselves. And we did do that through our conversations with the general contractors. And then also, because some of the distances that workers would need to travel were pretty far away, we wanted to allow for any kind of per diem costs and overnight stays that were necessary for the reconstruction process. What the results are is a high resolution recovery cost database. We have a recovery cost database that has about 80,000 unit cost line items. There's roughly 12,000 assemblies, which are collections of unit costs built in the correct proportions to allow for quicker, easier estimating processes. We also had to build something for 6 different island locations. We had to take into account some of the contextual issues involved in the construction at these locations. And we wanted to put that into an enterprise estimating platform that was available online, which, given the number of people working from home due to COVID, became very convenient. RSMO for FEMA now has indices that include some of the contextual costs for on-island work. We did make productivity adjustments. We did allow for material transportation to other than San Juan. We did allow for wage rate differences when we compared to Davis-Bacon. Sorry, flip that. And we deployed that into the RSMeans online software. So here's an example on the screen of the indices that we developed for locations on the island of Puerto Rico. And it may be a bit of an eye chart, but what you can see here is that we're not basing our index on just one number. we're basing it on multiple divisions within the CSI format. And in some cases, even the subdivisions have their own index. This is a very detailed and granular approach to the way that we adjust our data. We can deploy all of that information through RSMeans Online. RSMO for FEMA has 3 separate regions in Puerto Rico. And this is a little screenshot of RSMeans Online right here, where you can see that we have the location of Puerto Rico. And then when we drop down to the city, you would see, if we use this drop down, we have island, urban, and rural locations for Puerto Rico. RSMO for FEMA has all 3 of the US Virgin Islands, St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas. RSMO was adopted by FEMA in 2017 as an enterprise solution. It provides the advantages of scalability and security, and it enables a remote workforce to remain productive. At this time, I'd like to ask my co-presenter, Lisa Cooley, if she has anything to add. I'd like to thank everybody for your time, and I look forward to your questions. Lisa?
All right, thank you, Bob. So yeah, the deployment of this data set within a unique instance of RSMeans Online, FEMA's instance, was really enabled by this decision that FEMA made in 2017 to move from a legacy on-premises cost estimating, RSMeans-based cost estimating software program to RSMeans Online. It was very much part of their vision around how grants would be managed in the future, about how they would deploy the workforce. And it provided the opportunity to quickly scale. It provided the opportunity to transfer and optimize licenses as they had estimators coming on during disasters. These licenses could be easily redeployed. Historically, they had some problems with the CDs actually disappearing from some of their sites. So it provided them with a much more secure and controllable way to deploy the cost estimating functionality as well as the data. And it really allowed us to deploy this data to a wide range of users, not just in Puerto Rico. They certainly have a core of estimators in Puerto Rico, serving Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. But there are also folks at the new consolidated resource centers in Texas and in Winchester, Virginia, supporting those efforts. And so the cloud system really enables those folks to share data assets and to leverage the same data. I want to be clear that this is a unique version of RSMeans data, localized to Puerto Rico and the VI. It's not in the standard version of RSMeans Online. There are some really important differences to the data that make it critical that the right training is provided to the users so that they understand, the productivity changes, some of these contextual costs that have been layered in. So it is a FEMA recovery specific data set deployed within FEMA's instance of RSMeans Online. We have also deployed it for some contractors that support FEMA and some other stakeholders within the recovery environment down there. But the software platform was a critical enabler. It also, frankly, as COVID emerged this spring, enabled work from home. FEMA didn't miss a beat because they were able to just log in from anywhere, from a FEMA laptop or from home, and did not have to worry about any of their assets being inaccessible, any of their estimating assets. So I think we wanted to talk a little bit about the results that FEMA enjoyed out of this effort. There we go. So we call this the high resolution or high res database. just because it puts a much more rigorous level of cost data research, that boots on the ground work effort, and then a really deep dive quarterly research effort. And then the intention is to repeat that annually as this disaster recovery life cycle plays out in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So some of the results that FEMA saw. So this database forms an accurate and defensible cost basis for use in the cost estimating format. And then there's also something called the future price forecast that was developed by RAND that really takes some of these econometric factors and tries to predict what the construction economy in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands will do. The initial effort really just, because there was no local cost data in the Virgin Islands, they also developed a localization factor, and I think it was just like 1.5. It's like, oh yeah, we just need to do it at 150%. The deep dive research effort was able to bring into focus that not all of those costs were the same. You clearly saw in the Puerto Rico matrix, although it was a little bit of an eye chart, that labor costs are very low and material costs are quite high. That shifts a little bit in the Virgin Islands, where labor costs are a little bit higher. But it allowed us to bring into real focus the different cost variances based on material and installation, and based on different divisions. There are some materials that are extraordinarily expensive in Puerto Rico, and some that are quite inexpensive because they are locally produced with local labor. So now FEMA and its stakeholders, local governments, contractors supporting FEMA, all have this accurate and defensible cost basis, and it fits in nicely with the cost estimating format and future price forecast. This standardization and integration of contextual costs, and we're going to talk a little bit more about contextual costs as it relates to DoD. The cost estimating format is essentially the layering of contextual costs on the material, labor, and equipment cost basis that is RSMeans. The danger is that people can have different interpretations of those contextual costs. So what Gordian was able to do was to standardize some of those contextual costs, to say, okay, we know what it takes to get the material over to a remote island out of Puerto Rico. We've researched that. The estimators don't have to guess on it. We can layer that in a very standardized way and make sure that you have consistent results flowing down to all of these different local governments. And so it streamlines the effort for estimators. It backstops where there may be a lack in skill sets in estimating these contextual costs, and it ensures consistency. As we move forward with FEMA, these very rigorous quarterly updates will allow for the evolution of costs as the program rolls out. But it will do something else really important that FEMA sees and that we see, which is to provide data to better understand what happens in one of these post-disaster recovery construction economies. What is the construction economy of the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico going to do? We're going to gain some insight into that. There's a lot of theories based on economic principles that labor rates will increase significantly over time as there is more demand in the local economy. I think the economy of Puerto Rico is like 90 billion a year, and they've already pumped 7, 8, 9, 10 billion in, and there's much more to come. So what does that actually do to the economy? Does it actually start to drive costs? Gordian has a little bit of experience looking at this in the BRAC world, where there were massive programs being pumped into small or mid-sized cities like El Paso. And back in the middle 2000s, we actually looked at and analyzed what some of the cost impacts to the construction economy could be. This is an opportunity to take an even more rigorous approach based on the detailed quarterly updates and the annual on-island market surveys to understand exactly what sort of an impact a huge program has in a remote Oconus location. And so I think both FEMA and Gordian believe that there's the opportunity to do some advanced analytics and to gain some real insights into these drivers. And then finally, FEMA and its stakeholders have this common language for project formulation and grant quantification. So being able to work from the same data to formulate these projects is of tremendous value. I want to invite, I don't see any questions that have been posed yet, but I certainly want to invite attendees to ask questions. I think that we will, based on the time, we'll have a little bit of time at the end, and Bob and I would love to have some dialogue. So if you have any questions, please hop into the GoToWebinar tool and pose your questions. So now we're going to turn our attention to how this relates to DoD estimating, and I think that there is a fair amount of relevance. So I think if there's anything that 2017 to 2020 has taught us, it's to expect the unexpected. FEMA's mission has greatly expanded in its response to COVID-19. Whether it's a natural disaster or a global pandemic, we have to be prepared for the unexpected. And some of the impacts are like this concept of volatile markets. Certainly a post-disaster construction economy can be a volatile market, but I think we would all agree that a pandemic construction market is also a volatile market. Lots of changes in site-specific costs. Also, some significant changes in material, labor, and equipment costs. Some things escalate. Certainly, PPE is hard to personal protective equipment is hard to get hands on and can be very expensive right now. I think Bob would speak to the fact that we've seen some costs actually de-escalate or level out, especially those related to fuel, materials that are related to fuel costs, and also equipment operation costs. I think we've actually even seen that in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. The cost impacts of disaster construction logistics. So whether it's transporting materials when the roads have been washed out, as we see in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, or whether it is the logistics of building during a pandemic and the safety protocols, temperature checks, personal protective equipment, those are very real cost impacts. And then finally, I think there's an intersection around the implications for what I would call, congressional and public confidence, sometimes scrutiny around construction programs leveraging taxpayer dollars. Certainly something that FEMA has always experienced. The nature of recovery construction programs is that they're being executed in somewhat chaotic environments. There's very rapid emergency response. So sometimes the pricing and procurement process can be a little bit, I don't want to say chaotic, but it can be challenging because there's a need to move quickly to activate emergency recovery actions. But FEMA and its stakeholders have to be very responsible in the expenditure of funds. And certainly in our current pandemic, there has been a need for very rapid facility work efforts. And so definitely an intersection there. And then, an intersection with DoD's larger mission. DoD frequently has new missions or mission shifts. And so just that ability to respond quickly, but still to be responsible with taxpayer funds is really critical. I wanted to highlight and showcase a kind of a literal intersection of DoD and FEMA programs that we saw recently, and the way that tailored cost data, another way that tailored cost data can support cost-effective, rapid project execution. Again, I think more people are familiar with the RSMeans name. People are becoming more familiar with Gordian. Gordian has for 30 years specialized in the deployment of very tailored customer-specific cost data to support IDIQ execution programs. We deploy highly tailored cost data, enabling technology, and really a great deal of expertise and support in these types of programs. And we have hundreds of public owners, very large public entities across the U.S. One of our largest and longest standing customers is the city of Chicago. So when the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was given a new mission by FEMA this spring to develop a program around rapid facility transformation to receive the expected surge of COVID-19 patients, we were in a position to support. As we saw General Semonite have his kind of weekly press briefings of the program plan and scope of work for this type of rapid facility transformation. Our cost engineers very quickly got to work to validate that we had cost data to support that scope of work, and to develop the required cost data to fill the gap. And so we were able, within really just a couple of weeks, to spin up tailored cost data. The city of Chicago elected to leverage a job order contract that they already had in place with a proven contractor, leveraging this rapidly deployed tailored cost data that Gordian produced in order to do some of its transformation of McCormick Place. There were many contractors, and I think even many different procurement methodologies at play. It was very much a team effort. Some of that work was contracted directly by the Corps of Engineers, but where local municipalities had an execution vehicle, they were able to execute some of the work independently. And I think that there is an advantage to having a unit price basis to ensure the responsible use of taxpayer funds in a very rapid response environment. And so we were really proud of the work that we were able to do for the city of Chicago there, and to provide not only the cost data to govern, but also cost validation services to ensure a fair and reasonable price for this very critical work. We are all very fortunate that the facility was not needed at the scale that was feared, but it was still a really critical program to be able to execute on. Just a few of the items that were added to the construction, what we call the construction task catalog, which governs these IDIQ programs. Bob, I wonder if I might hand it over to you to review a couple of these, and also so that I can put out my barking dog, the joys of working from home. So I am going to hand it over to you for just a moment.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, sure. So hopefully people got a chance to look at the photographs on the previous slide. You saw the adjustable barrier panel systems. These are used not only in construction for dust protection, but frankly, in this case, they worked out exactly the way that FEMA wanted them to divide up areas within the McCormick Place to keep patients separated from each other. Temporary sheeting is a way to isolate spaces where there's potential infectious disease. We did put that in as items. Temporary floor protection as well had to be added in as tasks within the construction task catalog. Stud walls, a little bit more beefy than temporary sheeting. If we had to build stud walls, we would be able to, I'm getting a note here that the slide isn't showing. Hopefully it is now. Temporary portable and mobile trailers. We saw those in the photographs. The purchase or rental of those, plus the accessories needed like stairways and delivery of those trailers, all things that we added in. Decontamination chambers for people entering and exiting. It was really important that those decontamination chambers be included within the data set. We also got these information and developed tasks for the cleaning of surfaces, ceilings, walls, floors, even desktops, countertops, computers, cleaning of equipment and materials, the cleaning of ductwork. We got pricing on different types of equipment rental and added those different types of equipment rental. We were also able to get information in there for time and material-based tasks. Any kind of additional labor that was necessary, pricing on the required personal protective equipment, and any expendables, cleaning supplies, and so on. And then the disposal of anything hazardous as a result of all of the above items. All these items were added to our construction task catalogs, and frankly, they were also added to the RSMeans database and will be available this coming fall with the release of the new set of data. Lisa, I see you're back and you were able to calm your dog down, so I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Ooh, I think I accidentally stopped sharing my webcam. There we go. Apologies, I'm struggling with screen advancement just a little bit here. There we go. So what is the relevance to DoD, pandemics and rapid facility transformation notwithstanding? I'm in danger because I think this is like the third presentation I've given this summer where I've shown a couple of these slides. But you know, cost estimating is where we live, what we support, and it's something that DoD stakeholders are certainly looking at and struggling with. So we have the SAMI leadership around industry, government engagement, really focused on cost estimating, and there's a survey that's gone out. And it's really clear that the DoD cost estimating challenges are somewhat similar to what FEMA, not somewhat, very similar. I would say that the FEMA is almost an extreme version of some of the challenges that DoD has. If we look at this survey result from a survey that was distributed to SAMI stakeholders earlier this summer, labor costs and availability, natural disasters themselves can be an issue, and cost estimating issue and challenge. But clearly, you know, availability of material and labor costs, and then accelerated schedules, which are part and parcel of disasters. But everybody in DoD and those that support DoD is really looking at this issue of cost estimating. I know Office of Secretary of Defense is also really putting a lens on it and trying to understand how to improve the situation. And we really, at Gordian, saw this service to FEMA, this engagement with FEMA as an opportunity to kind of flex our muscles around what we have come to call contextual costs. Gordian and the RSMeans engineers have always done, you know, a phenomenal job of tracking at a very detailed and granular level the material, labor, and equipment costs. You know, 80,000 line items, 900 and some odd locations. But I think where DoD is struggling and where FEMA struggles in volatile markets is this idea of contextual costs. What about the things that aren't material, labor, and equipment that is actually built into the building, but the other factors, whether it is challenging site conditions or compressed schedules, or compressed award calendar year award schedules. The contracting vehicle or delivery method can make a difference. The size of the business doing the construction can make a difference in the cost. All of these things play into the cost, and by FEMA's account in the cost estimating format, can sometimes exceed the bare material, labor, and equipment costs. And so Gordian, really took up this challenge that FEMA gave us around researching and integrating some of the contextual costs in the post-disaster environment. But we're also looking at it on a broader level, really looking at how we can inform with new sources of data these contextual costs to help FEMA, to help DoD, to help really the entire federal government and our entire customer set better predict the real cost of construction. And so this is something I think, you're going to see some new tools and new types of data emerging from our research enterprise in the coming years as we continue to work on this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the need for predictive data. How do you predict the future? Gordian has undertaken a predictive cost data effort. I think we have another webinar scheduled in November that will do a deep dive into that topic. So I'll just kind of treat it briefly here. But obviously, construction is a very cyclical market. Things do not move up and down in tandem. Labor costs are very market specific. And there are emerging technologies and lots of changes in our business that can impact costs. And so, we've really been trying to take up the mantle of predicting costs in the future. And this is a huge challenge that DoD has because DoD has to program its larger projects, 3 to 7 years in advance. And, who knows what's going to be happening in 3 to 7 years, especially in this unpredictable construction environment. And so we have a standardized predictive cost data product. FEMA, some of FEMA's estimating groups have already begun to adopt that. It is not necessarily designed, it's more of a broad CONUS predictive cost database, so not necessarily designed for a specific post-disaster environment, although we are starting to look at how we can develop predictive methodologies for a specific construction market, specific localized construction market as well. And the benefits of predictive construction cost data are really just gaining that insight into future project costs. Sometimes it can even inform the choice of materials, knowing that one material will be resource constrained, and you may see price increases that may actually inform even construction methodology, and obviously providing those defensible budgets for future projects. So lots of opportunities in the predictive cost world. And then finally, we always look to GAO and their guidance, and GAO has certainly opined on both DoD and FEMA cost estimating, and made some recommendations for how to improve the estimating enterprise. The risk analysis and sensitivity analysis recommendations from GAO are really part and parcel with predictive. With predictive and with contextual costs, really kind of looking at the potential risks within a project. Certainly contractors in the DoD space many times are looking at project risk, and that is what is driving some of the cost uncertainty. And so certainly we are looking to GAO and looking to support federal agencies in fulfilling GAO estimating best practices. So I think with that, so just to wrap up, DoD clearly is needing more tailored and more high resolution cost databases for remote locations and volatile markets. and needing that defensibility around industry standard cost data, and the technology to support it, and the ability to project costs, and really needing those tools to incorporate the variable costs within volatile markets, and then finally the ability to really implement those GAO best practices. So I'm going to wrap it up there. We went a little longer than I expected, but I think we do have perhaps a question or two, Tamal.
Yes, we do. So our first question comes from David Clark, and it is, to what extent did contractor overhead and profit considerations, labor availability, get integrated into the cost index?
I'll take that, Lisa. Okay. So it's a great question, and it's a very easy answer. We didn't. The RSMeans relies upon the estimator to include for those kinds of conditions as part of what we refer to as the base estimate. Now, we do have recommended overhead and profit costs, but if the estimator has local knowledge, they should apply that themselves. And the reason for doing it this way is that our index has to remain very consistent. It has to be the same research done every quarter, which is how often we do that. And if we were to try and include contractor overhead and profit and labor availability during the quarters, that it would be very difficult for us to get consistent sources for that kind of information. Material prices, we can get consistent sources for that. Labor wage rates, we can get consistent sources for that. But things like overhead and profit and availability, very difficult to get consistent sources. So we don't include that. We expect that to be done in the base estimate.
Thank you for that answer, Bob. Next question would be from Jose Castro. I understand an issue in the Virgin Islands was the housing requirement for workforce during the crisis. From a hotel to tent to apartment cost, which varies, was that cost factored into the database? Bob?
I'll take that again, Lisa, and yes, it was. I did mention that we were looking at what potential per diem costs would be, and that was included as part of the index for those locations.
Thank you. Next question again is from Jose Castro. Was installation of temporary power generators for either purchase or rental included in the cost database?
So I'll take it again, Lisa. That we would expect you to include that as a line item in your base data. So if you include that within the base data, then obviously the answer is yes. We would refer to that as a general conditions type item. And the expectation is that the estimator who is working on a specific project and knows what is required for that project include things like generators as part of the base data cost.
And then the next question is, this is directed to Bob again. Is there any cost in the database to provide quality inspection services?
We have engineering costs and testing costs included as part of the database. We could include quality inspection within the engineering cost realm.
And final question. What about testing construction materials independent services? Has that been included in the cost database?
Yeah, so again, as I just mentioned, we do have a lot of line items for testing services and what the costs are for performing those tests.
Thank
you might
you
mention that one of the things that we're really looking at is we have the material, labor, and equipment basis. The RSMeans database has long included modifiers and certain line items that reflect some soft costs. Now we're looking at how we start to build in tools to help ensure that an estimator is capturing those contextual costs. But we're really looking closely at what belongs in the line items, what belongs in modifiers, and what perhaps belongs in different tools, whether they be markup tools or other types of costs that get layered in. So we're very cognizant of the different types of cost elements, and we're really exploring the most appropriate way to build them into the RSMeans database and set of technology tools.
Well, thank you, Lisa and Bob, for taking the time out to give this wonderful and informative presentation today. And thank you, Gordian, just for setting this whole thing up. I'm glad to be a part of it. So just one more item is upcoming events. Our small business conference will be virtual this year. It is held November 4th through the 6th, and registration is currently open. So go ahead and check out the website, samesbc.org, and check out what we have to offer. We have education sessions as well as business sessions as well. So thank you again, and you can find today's presentation and PDH certificate in the handout section in your control panel. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to Lisa and Bob, as they'll be more than welcome to answer your questions. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.